had exactly 60 seconds to decide if I was going to spend the rest of my life sharing my husband with his ex-girlfriend, or if I was going to burn down a $95,000 wedding right in front of his entire smug, smiling family. My name is Chloe. I am 29 years old, and up until that exact moment, I thought I was living a fairy tale. I was sitting at my own rehearsal dinner wearing a white silk dress, surrounded by 23 people in my future in-laws' sprawling suburban dining room. 2 weeks. That's all that was left until the biggest day of my life. My fiancé, let's just call him the mistake, stood up and clinked his champagne glass. I looked up at him, getting those familiar butterflies, expecting a toast about how much he loved me. Instead, he cleared his throat, looked me dead in the eye, and dropped a bomb that shattered my entire reality. He announced to the dead silent room that his ex-girlfriend Vanessa would always be a permanent part of his life. He called her his first love and claimed their connection transcended traditional boundaries. He said that because they were an evolved and modern family, he expected his future wife, me, to completely accept her presence at our family gatherings, in our home, and as his closest confidant. I stopped breathing. I literally felt the blood drain from my face. But the real nightmare wasn't just what he said, it was what happened next. I looked around the table, expecting someone, anyone, to gasp or tell him to sit down. Instead, my future mother-in-law smiled approvingly. His father nodded with this disgusting satisfaction. They had coached him. This wasn't a drunken mistake. This was a coordinated ambush. He looked at me with this triumphant smirk and delivered the ultimatum. He said if I couldn't handle Vanessa being a core part of our marriage, if I was going to be insecure and controlling, then maybe we needed to cancel the whole wedding. My hands were shaking so hard under the table that I had to grip my own thighs to stop them. For 5 years, I had shrunk myself to fit into their pretentious, pseudo-intellectual world. I had bitten my tongue when his mother criticized my career. I had smiled when his father mocked my middle-class upbringing. And now, they were trying to break me completely. They wanted to see if I was desperate enough for this ring to accept a crowded marriage. If you've ever had to deal with manipulative, toxic people who try to disguise their emotional abuse as being progressive, do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe button right now. Because trust me, what I did next is exactly what you've always wanted to do to them. In the past, the old Chloe would have panicked. I would have cried, apologized for not being open-minded enough, and begged him not to cancel the wedding. And they knew that. They were banking on it. They wanted a submissive daughter-in-law who would tolerate absolute disrespect just to keep up appearances. But sitting there, calculating the thousands of dollars in non-refundable deposits, something inside me snapped. It wasn't sadness. It was pure, icy clarity. I stood up slowly. The chair scraped loudly against their expensive hardwood floor. Every single eye in the room locked onto me. The smug smiles on his parents' faces started to falter just a fraction. They expected tears. They didn't expect the dead, emotionless stare I was giving their son. I looked right at him and asked him to confirm. I asked if his ultimatum was truly to accept his ex-girlfriend as a third person in our marriage, or cancel the wedding. He started to backtrack, using corporate buzzwords about fluid dynamics and toxic possessiveness. But I cut him off. I said the 3 words that destroyed his perfect little plan. Okay, it's canceled. The silence in that room was so heavy it felt suffocating. His mother actually shrieked, her fake composure completely shattering, screaming that I was throwing away a perfect relationship over childish jealousy. He chased me out into the hallway, grabbing my arm, telling me I was acting crazy and emotional. I looked at his hand until he let go, told him he made his choice, and walked out the front door into the cold night air. I felt this overwhelming sense of peace as I drove home to the house I had bought in my own name. I thought the worst was over. I thought I had won by walking away, but as I pulled into my driveway, my phone lit up with a message from his father. I opened it and my heart dropped into my stomach. They weren't going to let me just walk away. The message contained a legal threat that could not only bankrupt me, but cost me the very house I was sitting in. Sitting in my driveway, the phone screen illuminated the dark interior of my car. I stared at the text from his father, the words blurring together. We have invested considerable money in this wedding. There will be severe legal consequences if you proceed with this reckless decision. Before I could even process that, a voicemail notification popped up. It was his mother. Her smooth, sophisticated country club voice was completely gone, replaced by a shrill, desperate shriek. She accused me of destroying their family's reputation and throwing a tantrum just because I wasn't evolved enough to handle modern relationships. I turned off my phone, walked into my empty house, The house I bought with my own money, in my own name, and sat on the kitchen floor. I didn't cry. I was too busy bracing for the absolute hurricane that was about to hit me. The first strike came at 8:15 the next morning. It was Patricia, my wedding planner. Her voice was incredibly careful, the way you speak to someone standing on the edge of a cliff. "Chloe, I've started making the cancellation calls," she said. "But I wanted to give you a heads up about the financial situation before his family contacts you. The venue required a 70% non-refundable deposit. The caterer, 50%. The florist, the band, the photographer. Chloe, we're looking at approximately $95,000 in losses." My stomach plummeted. $95,000. His father had insisted on signing all the contracts to show off his wealth and control the planning. Now that arrogance was going to cost him nearly 100 grand. 10 minutes later, I turned my phone back on. It immediately started vibrating with a call from his father. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened to it, his voice was shaking with pure, unadulterated rage. He screamed that I was causing their financial ruin, that $95,000 was going down the drain, and that his lawyer was preparing to sue me for breach of promise, emotional distress, and financial damages. They thought they could bully me. They thought I was the same quiet, accommodating girl who had nodded along to their pretentious lectures for 5 years. They were wrong. I immediately called my own lawyer, the shark who had helped me close on my house. I explained everything. The dinner, the ultimatum, the exact words he used. She stopped me mid-sentence. "Chloe, do you have witnesses to this ultimatum?" she asked. 23 people, I replied. His entire family. My family and several mutual friends heard him say I should accept his ex as part of our marriage or cancel the wedding. I could practically hear my lawyer smiling through the phone. "Then you're untouchable. He gave you a clear public choice. You simply made it. Save every single threatening voicemail and text. Do not respond." The cat and mouse game had officially begun. His father's lawyer sent a terrifying, multi-page formal letter full of legal jargon, demanding I pay half the cancellation fees. My lawyer responded with a single piece of paper, a timeline of the public ultimatum, a list of the 23 witnesses, and copies of their unhinged, harassing voicemails. We never heard from their lawyer again, but the battle was far from over. 3 weeks after the canceled wedding, I was working at my dining table when I heard a key sliding into my front door lock. My blood ran cold. I had forgotten he still had a key. The door swung open, and there he stood. He looked terrible, clothes wrinkled, hair uncombed, heavy bags under his eyes. For a split second, my old instinct kicked in, the urge to ask him what was wrong and comfort him. Then I remembered the $95,000 threats. "What are you doing here?" I asked, staying on my side of the room. "I live here," he said, his voice defensive but uncertain. "No, you don't." I kept my voice dead level. "You moved in, but this house is in my name. You were a guest, and your stay is over." He looked around the living room, really seeing it for the first time. His gaming console was gone. His books were gone. I pointed to the hallway. I had spent the entire week systematically packing every single thing he owned into cardboard boxes stacked by the door. He panicked. "You can't just kick me out. I have rights." "Check with your father's lawyer if you don't believe me," I shot back. "Take your boxes and get out." Did you honestly think I would just cave? That I'd spend my entire marriage competing with Vanessa for your attention? "It wasn't about competition," he yelled, finally breaking his calm facade. "It was about being mature. You wanted to have your cake and eat it too, and you got caught," I said quietly. "Get out. I'm changing the locks tomorrow." He left, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. The next morning, a locksmith replaced every deadbolt in the house. I was secure physically, but I didn't realize they had already launched a massive attack on my reputation. His family went on a full-scale smear campaign. My hairdresser told me they were spreading rumors at the country club that I had suffered a severe mental breakdown, that I was insanely jealous, and that I had hysterically canceled the wedding over nothing. They were trying to rewrite history to make themselves the victims. But they had made one fatal miscalculation. They forgot about the witnesses. The truth spread faster than their lies. Every person at that rehearsal dinner started talking. The real story, the public ultimatum, his mother's smug laughter, my calm walkout, reached every corner of our social circle. His family's reputation as enlightened, progressive intellectuals completely collapsed. They became the laughingstock of their own elite community. I thought I had won. I thought the worst of the fallout was finally behind me, and I could just move on with my life in peace. But then, late on a Friday night, my phone buzzed. It wasn't my ex, and it wasn't his insane parents. It was a text from Trevor, my ex's best friend, the guy who had stood silently by him for years. The message made my blood run cold all over again. Chloe, we need to talk right now. I can't keep covering for him anymore. There is something you don't know about him and Vanessa, something they've been hiding from everyone for the last 3 years. I met Trevor at a dimly lit coffee shop on the edge of town, far away from our usual social circles. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He didn't even say hello. He just slid a printed stack of text messages across the table and said, "I'm so sorry, Chloe. I should have shown you these 3 years ago." I looked down at the papers. They were screenshots of conversations between my ex and Vanessa. As I read them, the puzzle pieces of that horrific rehearsal dinner finally snapped into place, and the truth was so much darker than an evolved, modern connection. Vanessa wasn't his soulmate. She was a parasite, and my ex was her host. According to the text, Vanessa had been stringing him along for years while she dated wealthy finance guys. But 2 months before our wedding, the latest guy had dumped her and kicked her out of his penthouse. She was completely broke and facing eviction. And that's when my ex came up with his brilliant, progressive plan. He didn't just want me to accept her at family gatherings. The text outlined his exact strategy. He was going to wait until we were legally married, then use my guilt and his family's pressure to manipulate me into letting Vanessa move into the guest room of my house, the house I bought and paid for. He was literally going to use my stability, my income, and my home to fund his ex-girlfriend's life, under the guise of being an enlightened, fluid family. I felt a wave of nausea, followed instantly by the most intense, fiery relief I have ever experienced in my life. If I hadn't stood up and walked out of that dinner, I would have been legally trapped in a nightmare, subsidizing the life of the woman my husband was actually obsessed with. "I was a coward," Trevor said quietly, staring at his coffee. "I watched him manipulate you. I watched his parents encourage it because they thought it made them look like European aristocrats or something. I should have burned it all down. But watching you walk out that night, you did it yourself, and I realized I couldn't be friends with a monster anymore." That coffee shop meeting changed everything. The rage that had been keeping me awake at night evaporated. You don't stay angry at a bullet that missed you. You just thank God you dodged it. I funneled every single ounce of my energy into my career. I am an architect, and for 5 years, my ex had belittled my ambitions. And telling me my projects took up too much time, now, I had all the time in the world. Months passed. My firm won the bid to restore the city's most iconic historic theater, a multi-million-dollar project. Because of my sudden, relentless dedication, my boss made me the lead architect. I was working 14-hour days, surrounded by blueprints, dust, and history. I was thriving. I was building something real, something that would outlast all the drama and the lies. And quietly, naturally, Trevor stayed in my life. We started getting coffee once a week, then dinner. He didn't play games. He didn't try to make me smaller so he could feel bigger. He listened to me talk about crown molding and foundational structures with actual, genuine interest. For the first time in my adult life, I felt completely seen. Meanwhile, Hand Karma was doing its job beautifully. Through the grapevine, I heard the evolved family had completely collapsed. The $95,000 wedding debt had crippled his parents. They had to sell their sprawling suburban home and move into a cramped 2-bedroom condo. My ex was forced to move in with them. And Vanessa? The moment she realized my ex no longer had access to my house or my money, she ghosted him entirely. The transcendent, eternal bond evaporated the second the cash stopped flowing. 14 months after the canceled wedding, the historic theater restoration was finally complete. The city hosted a massive black tie gala to celebrate the reopening. The mayor was there, the city's elite were there, and I was the guest of honor. I wore a deep emerald green silk gown. Trevor was my date, looking incredible in a tailored tuxedo. As we walked into the grand lobby that I had spent over a year bringing back to life, flashbulbs went off. A national architecture magazine was doing a feature on me. I felt untouchable. I was 29, successful, beautiful, and completely free. The mayor called me to the grand staircase to give a toast. The crowd fell silent. I stood at the top of the marble steps, Trevor smiling proudly at me from the front row. I reached out to take a glass of champagne from a passing server to begin my speech. But as my fingers brushed the crystal stem, the server's hand trembled violently. The glass shattered on the marble floor. I looked down at the server wearing the cheap black vest. It was him. My ex, working for minimum wage at my victory party. The color drained from his face as he stared up at me. But he didn't just stand there in shame. As the crowd gasped at the broken glass, he stepped past the spilled champagne, leaned directly into my space, and whispered something so unhinged it made my blood run absolutely cold. The grand lobby of the historic theater was dead silent. The shattered crystal champagne glass lay between my expensive emerald gown and his scuffed minimum wage work shoes. He stepped past the spilled champagne, leaned so close I could smell the cheap mint he was chewing to mask his anxiety, and whispered, "My father is forcing me to pay back every cent of the $95,000. Vanessa drained my savings and blocked my number. I sleep in my childhood bed, Chloe. Every single night I dream about our house. Please, just tell people you forgive me. If you forgive me, maybe my parents will too." He looked at me with these wide, desperate eyes. He was begging. The man who had stood up in front of 23 people and demanded I accept his ex-girlfriend into my marriage was now begging me to save him from the absolute ruin he had created for himself. 2 years ago, seeing him like this would have broken my heart. Even a year ago, I might have felt a spark of vindictive joy, a desire to scream at him or throw the rest of the champagne in his face. But looking at him in that moment, I realized something incredible. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt absolutely nothing. He wasn't the love of my life anymore. He wasn't even the villain of my story. He was just a sad, pathetic stranger in a cheap vest who had dropped a glass at my party. I took a slow step back, creating physical distance between us. I looked him dead in the eye. And with a voice so calm it surprised even me, I said, "You made your choice. Now please clean up the glass before someone gets hurt. I have a speech to give." His breath hitched. The last shred of his ego completely shattered. He realized in that exact second that he had no power over me, no place in my life, and that I truly, completely did not care about him anymore. He slowly dropped to his knees right there in the lobby and started picking up the broken crystal with his bare hands. I turned my back on him and walked up the marble stairs. Trevor met me halfway. He had seen the whole thing unfold. He didn't ask if I was okay, because he looked at my face and already knew the answer. He just offered me his arm, and together we walked to the podium. I gave my speech. I looked out over the crowd of hundreds of people who were there to celebrate my hard work, my vision, and my leadership. I thanked my team, my firm, and Trevor, who smiled back at me with genuine, uncomplicated pride. And somewhere in the back of that room, my ex had to stand against the wall, holding a tray of dirty glasses, and watch the woman he thought was too small and traditional dominate the room. Later that night, Trevor and I drove back to our new place, a beautiful loft we had picked out together. It wasn't just my house anymore, it was our home. No ghosts, no bad memories, no manipulative in-laws, just peace. Through my cousin, I eventually heard the final epilogue of the evolved family. My ex's coaching business failed entirely. He was still living in that cramped 2-bedroom condo with his bitter parents, who reminded him daily that he had ruined their retirement and their social standing. They were trapped together in a prison of their own making. And me? I think back to that rehearsal dinner a lot. I think about how I sat at that table, feeling my entire world collapse. I had exactly 60 seconds to decide if my life was going to be a tragedy of compromises or if I was going to stand up for myself. Walking away cost them $95,000. But what I gained was priceless. I gained my career. I gained a partner who actually respects me. But most importantly, I got myself back. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just living well, walking away from toxic people and building a life so beautiful that they can only watch it from the outside.